with Jason Rubin. He's going to give us brief on the Army implementation. Then we're going to go on to Steve Farr is going to give us some lessons learned from the Air Force implementation. Brian, if you've chimed back on the phone, please, since you guys have done a lot in DFAS, let us know. And NGA as well has done quite a bit, so NGA can give us some lessons learned. So go ahead, Jason.
All right, welcome back, folks. Again, I'm Jason Rubin, Department of the Army, and I'm probably going to go off script a little bit because I know that makes Mike nervous. But I'm kind of listening to the dialogue, and so I think there's a lot of common areas about this that I think we kind of are on the same page. So I want to use this opportunity to talk about our unique challenges, and maybe that would be useful to you. This brief can, I guess, serve as a cautionary tale for anybody thinking about getting into professionalization, teach them to run the other way. I think Dave Day said it best one time when we were up late like we always are, talking on the phone and gossiping with a gallon of ice cream in our laps.
Oh, so true, brother. Keep preaching it.
I think Dave once said, we're all in different boats, but we're in the same ocean. And I think that's a really apt way to describe this, is we're all trying to get to the same place. We all have the same muscle movement to make in terms of identification of positions and indexing, but we all have our own unique challenges. So that's kind of what I'll talk about here in the next slide. The Department of the Army, in terms of 080s, our 080s are split between two different career programs. We've got multiple career programs that cover, of course, all disciplines. And our 080s are split between our career program 19 and our career program 35. Career program 35 is intelligence. And so what we find is the preponderance of our 080 positions handling all of the core disciplines fall within that career program. Industrial, physical, information, personnel. Career program 19 is our Gates, Guns, Guards, our Provost Marshal General Office. And so they are physical security as well. But the division is physical security over there, Gates, Guns, Guards, arms room inspections, things like that. Whereas our physical security is more accreditation of SCIFs, protection of classified information. And so that's where, for us, one particular challenge is as we implement this, we've got to make sure the equities of those two career programs are addressed. And on the phone, we've got a rep from OPMG, Mr. Nick Hunter. He attends a lot of their work sessions with them. He works out of their career management office. And then I also have some folks from our CP35 career management office as well. So if I say anything stupid, usually a high probability of that, because I shoot from the hip, they'll jump in.
Yeah, Jason, I'm recording you, and Dwayne wants me to play it back when you're done.
So that's kind of a layout. We've got approximately 2,200 encumbered 080 positions. And I think you heard a little bit earlier that some components are implementing the SPeD differently. For example, Air Force is targeting the 086 positions. And for them, they'll have at a minimum the SFTC certification. And I know Steve Barr will come up and talk a little bit about that. For us in the Army, we're, at least in Phase 1, targeting only the 080 positions. And our rationale for that is if you're doing security to a degree that requires certification, you're doing security to a degree that requires certification, and you're not in 080, that's a problem. You should be. Are there perhaps 301s out there that could be indexed to a position? Could we justify it? Yes. On the Army side, those folks are going to be reclassified as 080s. So again, our target population are 080 civilians. Somebody else earlier mentioned contractor and military. For us, that's a bridge too far in terms of the military. We are not going to go to our leadership and be able to articulate a logical reason why we're going to be able to target military personnel to become SPeD certified. For example, well, first of all, we don't have an MOS or a skill identifier for security. We've got this guy, this green suit or this girl, and commander says, you know what? You're handing out basketballs today, tomorrow you're going to be the S2. And you're going to do that for a little while. So that creates a special challenge for us in terms of identifying those positions, which then creates the challenge of us to then index those positions. And then, of course, the justification for requiring those conditions of employment, which creates a whole other issue with military. Contractors, we're on board with that, but that's going to have to come at a later phase. And Ms. Humphrey talked a little bit about some of the major muscle movements that would have to occur in order to pull that off. Adding language to the DFAR, which would allow contracting activities to then go ahead and justify in their statements of work, performance work statements, that this contractor or contract shall provide SPeD certified personnel. Our opinion, and this is a rabbit hole, I won't go into it, is that for contractor personnel, we can set a mark on the wall. And after we get the justifications and everything we need in place in terms of the DFAR clause, then all contracts after this point could require those certifications if they meet a certain threshold of performing security. But to then go back and try to do that for existing contracts is going to create a significant problem when some bean counter says, has anybody actually done the cost-benefit analysis on this? Or we've negotiated these contract labor rates, and now you're telling the contractor that they need to now provide certified personnel. That's, again, a bridge too far. So a lot of words, but basically just to say that for now, our focus is civilian 080s within the Department of the Army. That's a little bit why. We have a different...
Hey, Jason? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hey, question. How is Department of the Army addressing the issues of the 0083 police officers? Are they going to be included in your indexing activities, or are they excluded?
Dwayne, do you want to talk about your police officers?
Hey, Jason, this is Nick.
Nick?
Yeah, no, 083s, that's our law enforcement side. They will not be touched. Our 085s, our security guards, they will not be touched in any indexing certification. Right now, we're just looking at our 080s, our physical security specialists on our side, and then the 080s on the CP35 side. So no, and our 086s we're not looking at right now either.
Thank you.
And before I move on, I think that's probably a place to insert that Dr. Joe really laid out during the day the different ways that the different certifications will be laid out in terms of what's prerequisite, what's not, what's required across the department, what is component-specific, what is a component-specific determination for us, for Army. We have a number of folks on Nick's side of the house that truly are physical security focused. We recognize we want to develop broad performing security specialists, but for those, to just get them in the program, it would not make sense at the GS7 and maybe even 9 level for them to ask them to then try to attain a certification across all the disciplines at SPC. So for those people, their gateway certification will be the CDSE. And we're talking about 900 folks. The rest of our folks, approximately 1,200, will be mapped to the SFPC as their baseline certification. And then as they rise up the ranks, they'll all meet from there. So that's the Department of the Army approach, a little bit different than, say, the Air Force, for example. But again, that's a little bit of the reason why. Our unique challenge is that we're very decentralized. I keep going back to the Air Force simply because I think we talk the most service to service. We have a good relationship with the Navy as well. But, Air Force, and again, Steve will speak much more better about this, but I would argue that they're probably a little bit more centralized in terms of their career management. we are a lot more decentralized in terms of our career management. We've got 080 positions out there that are owned by the commanders, and anything that we do up in the ivory tower of headquarters is going to have to get the head nod north and south from a commander out there. So, I've been working with for the Army with the SPeD program here for the last 3 years, and I think we've reached an inflection point where we've kind of had to go back and redesign our implementation. Partly because of the decentralized nature, but again, we've got 2,200 positions. We've got probably 4,000 or 5,000 position descriptions, and I think Dr. Joe talked a little bit about that. But in terms of our PDA encumbered positions, or positions we're trying to hire again, those are the 2,200 I'm talking about. And for us to go through and attempt to index all of those positions, we started going down that road, and it's just problematic because, one, they're not written well. Two, they're all different because a lot of them are written because I wanted this girl or I wanted that guy. Not me, that particular commander did. And so we've kind of stopped, and this is why we were talking a little bit earlier about what's the deadline, and this is why we're hanging our hat on that 2016 deadline. One, because that's a requirement, but two, we need the extra time because for us, we need to go back to standardize our position description. And when we briefed up the Army leadership on what we were trying to do here, they said, hey, we fully support it. No, by the way, it's a requirement, but we would like you to use this opportunity as a force and function to go back and take your 2,200 PDs. In some cases, you may have 150, 200 PDs that all say different things, but all of those people are essentially performing the same function. And pare those down, consistent with the defense security skill standards, and create a subset of that, a smaller number of standardized PDs. And then as part of that process, to then go back and index them in a standardized manner. And then take that product, again, because we're very decentralized and nothing happens until a commander checks off on it, staff that out to the field. And I think we'll have a lot better, easier chance of justifying our decisions, as Dr. Joe said, and getting their buy-in on. Because when you have so many different PDs, of course, for those of you who have started to go through this process, it's hard to justify. I'm giving the same certification to one person to another person, but both PDs are written completely different. Okay? Next slide. Again, I'm sorry, I'm going way off script here. We can actually skip past that. Because a lot of this talks about the common elements that Joe has already gone through, and I think we're all on the same page. What's the next slide, please? Okay. The other thing I want to talk about, because again, I promised when I would come up here, I'm not going to rehash what Joe said, but what I want to talk about is unique challenges. And I think this is one area that you all have begun to acknowledge or will acknowledge as you go through this process, is that you reach a where in the beginning, this really is a security program to implement. But once you get to a certain point, we've been working with DSS to develop the program to make sure that the competencies on which the program is built are valid. But you get to a point where it switches to an HR function, an HR lead to implement the program. And fortunately, we've established a good relationship with our HR partners in the Army. Without them, this would be absolutely impossible because you're going to start to get into a lot of the things that Dr. Joe talked about in terms of conditions of employment. You're going to get into how to actually go through the position classification. I'm not sure how many folks in here are HR. I'm an 080. But for us, we've reached that point where the program has been largely built, and the competencies on which it has been built have been validated. We have been at the table as part of that process. But now we're sort of handing this off to the HRs, and we are taking an assist role, and they are helping us to implement that program. And there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. But that's something that I felt was useful to communicate to our leadership when we were asking for resources. So, I offer that to you just as a lesson learned for us. Next slide. And I was kind of laughing because as Joe was going through the challenges, it looked very similar to my slide because we all run into the same roadblock. The legal aspect, that's something that we still do not have our hands around in terms of getting the condition of employment in place. How do we deal with the appeals process, these sorts of things? I know that at the DSS level, a lot of you are on the working groups. We're working through what does that process look like in terms of the SPeD program, but what does the process look like at the component level when they fail to maintain their certification? And so those are some of the same challenges we're working through. In terms of the lead process, we intend to use that, but we need to build that into our standardization process. That's what we're doing right now. There's a lot of things I know I'm talking to you about. This is what we need to do. This is not necessarily something we have done. But again, we had to take a step back. And in terms of the standardization, how do we build in the lead process? So we standardize the PDs. We go down from 2,200 PDs down to 30 or whatever it is, and then apply the mapping to the various certifications. So that's the integration of what Joe was talking about with our new approach is where we are. So any questions? That's kind of an overview of where we've been, where we had to stop, where we had to go back and redesign.
Is there anything you'd like to point out on your ConOps that they provided their ConOps? You can download it on the file share, but is there anything you'd like to point out about the ConOps and how you got there, you developing that?
Yeah, so the ConOps that you have, and I think you all have a copy of it, it's a draft. It's a work in progress. That started as just a nation document about 3-4 years ago. And that really, again, it lays out the major things that need to be done in terms of communicating. It's very Army specific in terms of we don't have the ability at this point. We don't have a centralized career management office that I'm integrated with. Okay, so you've got the commanders out in the field that we've got to index positions, and we've got to provide them a product that they have to check off on. They own the position. So that ConOps kind of lays that out. What it doesn't really talk about is the standardization of the positions, and that's something that we're going to have to add in an earlier version.
Any other questions for Jason?
I'm listening to the discussion around the room, and it's part of the reason I went a little off script here instead of following the brief, because it sounds like everybody's kind of at a different phase in terms of where they are. I mean, there's some folks that are running down the road. Steve's brief, I think when he comes up here, is probably going to be more in line of what you want in terms of what does the indexing look like. And then there's some folks that are just kind of coming on. So, I mean, what are your questions in terms of your own specific component challenges? Yes, sir.
Did I misunderstand? You said that your 080s are mainly physical security. You don't have personnel security, you don't have ComSec.
No, we have all of the above.
And you're not looking at those to integrate those into the...
Well, we have 2 career programs. And the career program, remember I talked about career program 35, that's our intel. And, of course, 132s handle our intel, but as part of that, security is an enabling thing. And so we have people across all disciplines that do all of that. We have people that focus too. But all of the disciplines really reside in there. Now, our breakout that I talked about in terms of physical security, that's our provost function. And those are the folks that really need to, for a lot of them, particularly up to a certain grade level, they don't necessarily need to be good across all the disciplines. They need to be really good at inspecting rooms. They need to be really good at protecting nukes. Because when somebody loses a nuke, that's going to be a problem. Now, as they rise up the ranks and they start managing programs and they start partnering with the intel folks, that's where, for them, they need to get a better understanding of all the different things. And so,
Hey, Jason, this is Nick. Let me just chime in. We have about 900 of the 080s in our career program in the Office of the Provost Marshal General. So, doing the lead process with them and already looking at them, we're probably at 60% we'll start out with the PSC, and then the rest will probably their core certification that they get indexed to. Just looking at it, maybe 40%. So it's not everybody in our career program is going to necessarily start at the PSC. The PSC we're looking at as a gateway to help them kind of get into this. This is for our physical security inspectors, mainly GS7s and 9s who are actually doing, as Jason said, they're out there for 20 years doing inspections of arms rooms and so forth. But they know if they have to move up, you can't go from the PSC to SAP PC. You got to go back to the SFPC and take that core certification if you want to, move up and go do something different. So it's kind of a gateway for those, that percentage of people that do that. Hopefully that kind of clears it up.
And just to kind of add on to that, obviously we Army are going to be implementing all of the certifications in one way or another. But we're really only interested in two of the specialty certifications. One is the physical security certification for tactical we talked about. The other is SAT, specialty at gateway, folks will be required to FTC prior to getting that. But we're not necessarily going to.
Brenda Worthington
is now exiting.
The industrial security is certainly not.
When we, and Joe may want to answer this as well. So when we index, or when the components are indexing to a certification, such as SPSC or SPIPC or one of the other ones, they would just index to that one, correct? Because SFPC is already part of the rules that they have to go at SFPC. So they wouldn't say you have to get SFPC and SPSC. You'd only say SPSC, and SFPC just has to be a requirement to get SPSC. You're only indexing to one, right? You're not if you have a prerequisite of SFPC.
Let's see if I can make it easy. So, the majority of our 080s will have a baseline requirement at SFPC, with the exception of 50% of NICS folks, who their baseline requirement is going to be the PSC. For the folks that are going to go on to get maybe the SAP specialty certification, I can guarantee you that probably not going to be folks on NICS side. But those folks that have, for example, they're mapped to SFPC and the SPC. Or it may be SFPC, SPSC, and SPIPC, because they may be working for the management level. So that's how the baseline, again, for the Army is going to be SPSC for a very small subset, and then SFPC for everybody else.
So even though it's a requirement of one of the other ones, they're just going to have that right off the get-go.
Yeah.
Anybody on the phone? Any questions for Jason before we move to the AF? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rubin. One of the things that while Steve's getting ready and they're getting his slides up, one of the things that Jason did mention during his presentation is he made the point that when you guys are doing your policies or your instructions, is you're going to have to make sure you differentiate between what DSS or the program office is doing as far as like appeals that deal with the program side of the house versus what you're going to have to do inside like if they appeal to you for something specific, like, they wouldn't appeal to DSS if their position was miscoded, because DSS is, we already told you, I don't say it's none of our business, but it's not within our swim lane. But you guys would have to have something set up within your instructions, policies, etc., to go ahead and handle that as well. So that was a good point Jason brought up as he was talking through it. So I think we're up ready for Mr. Farr.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stephen Farr, and I'm assigned to the Air Force Personnel Center located at Randolph Air Force Base, Texas. For those who may be unfamiliar with AFPC, It's the center which is responsible for all civilian and military personnel actions within the United States Air Force. Having the Air Force CDPMO office embedded within ASPD gives us quite a bit of benefits, such as access to subject matter experts in the field of personnel, as well as a multitude of different databases. And really feel this level of access really helps to inform and streamline our indexing process. Next slide. The indexing process is pretty straightforward to build. However, just one word of caution, it does take a moderate amount of labor to build up front to complete the process. But we certainly feel that the initial investment will provide our commanders with security professionals with the necessary skills and abilities.
They can't hear you on the phone, hardly. If you can, if you want to come out toward the middle. Yeah. He's gone.
You hear me now?
Hello?
Anyway, we feel that the initial investment's certainly worth it, and we feel that we'll be able to provide our commanders with security professionals with the necessary skills and abilities to adequately do their job and meet the requirements of the SPeD program. You look here, step one, and kind of what I'm going to do is I'll kind of tell you about it, and I'll show you on the various slides as we go through. Basically, we downloaded all the PDs by grade. Said we work within civilian personnel, so we have access to this database, and it was pretty easy for us to get our hands on the various PDs. Once we downloaded them, we converted them into a PDF file for standardization, but also the PDF file is pretty easy to use, where we were able to later on cut and paste that verbiage into our spreadsheet, or our justification spreadsheet, which we'll discuss in a moment as well. Next, we sorted them out by type. We have 086s, separated by our CPD, our SCPD, and the NSPDs. The NSPD is kind of a legacy. We're kind of phasing those things out. But the Air Force Core personnel documents, does anybody know kind of what those are all about? You do. Okay. You do. Okay. It's more of a kind of a customized PD. So if we look at maybe a job type where you have maybe a foreign disclosure officer doing Tempest, something really weird, or maybe doing a polygrapher, we don't have a lot of those in the Air Force inventory. That's when we would really use one of those CPDs. But our SCPD, which is the Air Force Standard Core Personnel document, that is pretty much a generic document, and so it's basically off the shelf. So if I'm a selecting official, I want to put an individual, say, on a info personal industrial job, he can grab that out of the library, put a name on it, and send it down the process. It helps to kind of an efficiency there. Next, we sorted the PDs by kind of the specialty area where they're working in the SAP or STI community. And okay, and then we indexed the newly developed SCPDs and retained the CBCs and PDs. Here, go back to okay. Yeah, within step 7, this is really where the hard work begins, and it involves reading each PD because we're trying to, tailor them to the individual. And I'll kind of go over in a minute on how we do that. Next slide. In step 8, once all the PDs have been sorted through and we've read them, and we've created our various, I probably need to back up just one step. As we're sorting them out, and we're talking about all of our SCPDs or CPDs, what we're trying to do is look, and certainly, when we get looking on the spreadsheet, it'll probably be a little bit more clear. But we were able to identify a lot of CPDs that could be made into SCPDs. For example, some of them we had 150 CPDs pretty much with all the like duties, We're going to wrap those all up into one SPeD. And our personnel, there's an efficiency there. Certainly they're happy to do that for us as well. Okay. So then once the individual, let's call it the indexer, completes his work, or actually probably before he completes his work, then there's this oversight piece. And within the Air Force, this is going to come from the career field management team. And it's basically an audit on the indexer. And I begged them, I said, please, don't let me get 2,000 miles down the road and tell me, I left my baggage back, in Omaha or something like that. Let me know ahead of time. So periodically they're going to go through and they're going to look at our spreadsheet that we have, the justification spreadsheet, and just to make sure I'm vectoring, tracking correctly, and make fine-tunes as we go along the process. Next, we're going to send it out to our MAGCOM and our POCs for approval or reclama. We really intend to build a transparent process, so our MAGCOMs will have a say, and we'll certainly listen to the voice of our customer there. In step 10, we'll, of course, brief our boss, the FM, on all the results and get the okay to pull the trigger on it. And then lastly, we're going to use our security career field program extract to note each individual requiring the certification. Our extract is really the faces where it lines up, where our justification spreadsheet is more of the spaces. Next slide. Here, if I drill down, so if you kind of think you're with me and we're kind of at my desk and I'm just trying to drill down how we did that. First, we established all our folders. It's not real clear on here, but you see it's like GS5 all the way down to our GG5 all the way down to GS15. We established those folders. We double click again. Next slide. You'll see the different PDs. We have them broken out. Next slide. And here's the different areas where disciplines that all of our specialists are working in. Next slide. Various types where they're occurring. So there's an SCI or a SCI SAP built. Next slide. And here's the PDs themselves, and you see the PD numbers are all attached here. And we use this file system in order to populate our spreadsheet once we built this. We built this first, and then we went and populated our justification spreadsheet. Next slide. Here's the spreadsheet. It's a little blurry here. You kind of see where we're at. Kind of helps us track. But here's the grade. The next column is the type of PD, whether it's CPD or SCPD. This is the functional area, specialty. That's it. There. That's great. The PD number. And then we have, we're looking here and see. This block here, these are all CPDs identified as candidates to be made into SCPDs. Does that make sense? And then when we're just working from left to right, and this is the various certifications that folks can index to. Next slide.
Would it help for us, can we open up, because we have the actual spreadsheet, will that help you show the different things?
It probably would if you have it, because it's kind of, I didn't really expect it to look like this.
When you put it on the slide, it really
kind of changed a little bit.
Okay, we'll keep going, and we'll see if we can bring it up.
And really, on this slide, you really can't read it, but remember I was talking about how we downloaded stuff into PDF format? Well, this is kind of where we went and we kind of copied, and we pasted the justification in here. So I kind of foresee down the road, not that anybody ever complains in the Air Force, but getting a phone call that says, hey, how come I was indexed to such and such? Well, we could easily go in there and pull the justification out, tell it, or discuss it on the phone.
So on your tool here.
Michael Jenkins, BLA.
Is now exiting.
What?
Stop yelling at me, Mike. So everything on your spreadsheet. So you use this spreadsheet is actually your process, your guide, your checklist.
Pretty much, of course, we built our file system, so our file system marries up perfectly with our spreadsheet. Of course, we had to build the file system with all PDs, and because for us it was a sorting tool. Now, part of my purpose here is certainly not to tell you guys how to eat the cabbage, but really tell you how the Air Force is eating the cabbage. And so this is what worked for us. And because a lot of it, and I don't know if I really hammered it too hard, was building those
Is now joining.
CPDs from those CPDs, condensing them down and indexing them to kind of get an efficiency there with the personnel process. And we cast a large net with many PDs, which you may not need to do. You might look at, I don't know if all the components have extracts, but look at the folks who are really sitting within those positions and index those certain positions as well. Here's the sheet. This is something John Young had built, and it's pretty amazing. I mean, it looks like it's going to really work out for us.
Steve, is there a companion guide that deals with this?
A companion guide?
For a tutorial?
I don't know after this trip if you guys will allow me to come back, but everybody in our office travels for TDY money, so, times are tough. Can't work overtime, but we'll go TDY. So, Mr. Day?
Yes, sir.
Does that go okay? Can we travel a little bit?
How deep are USDI's or DSS's pockets? That's the only question.
The kids are getting ready to go back to school. We need to buy some shoes.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, we can, if you need us to put together a guide or something like that, it's pretty solid. I mean, it's not rocket science necessarily, but it flows. And certainly if you guys ever have any questions, just call me, and I certainly spend time to go over the way we did it. But it might not work, for all the other components.
Would you be willing to share your processes and copies of your PDs that might mirror to other people? Instead of us having to rewrite them and stuff, if it's organic or close to it, that saves a huge amount of time.
I'm sure we would be willing to share whatever we have, Where we are in the phase right now is we have identified our CPDs that are candidates for the SCPD, and we haven't actually pulled the trigger and worked with our HR to build those yet, but that's forthcoming. But yeah, I don't see why not, why we couldn't share if you had, especially if it's a standard, info, personal, industrial. We got all kinds of language, and we can shoot them where they need to go.
What does your HR folks think about this tool?
The HR folks, they're on board, and the HR, I think the way we did it is kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Day, but I believe the push from AFPC is for all the other career fields to kind of go more to those SCPD. And this is the avenue that we used, and so they're certainly on board. We get a lot of support, and technically, I'm HR, I'm embedded now with AFPC. Still kind of an awakening for me, being an 080, being classified as a 301, and difficult, but we're working through it.
Yeah, we're to the caveat off that, this is Dave Day Air Force. As Steve alluded to, we're embedded with Air Force Personnel Center, and the Central Classification Office for all of Air Force is here, AFPC DPIC, and we're working hand in glove with them. Actually, we're helping them out as we go through as part of our indexing process, because their goal is to have as many of these CPDs turn into SCPDs. And so our mutual goal between us and AFPC, us, I mean SAF AA, is to have at least 80% of our career field on the central SCPDs as part of our indexing in state. So it's good for them because it saves them hundreds of man hours across all the different locations that, the HR staffing world. And it's great for us because now we have experts in classification is helping us consolidate all these PDs that we have out there, all these individual CPDs, core personnel documents, and turning them to a much smaller, manageable, easier to index core group of position descriptions. Did I get that right, Mr. Farr? I didn't want to.
Yes, sir. That's perfect.
Okay. I'll go back in my box now.
Steve, how many positions within the Air Force do you believe will be encumbered with at least one certification?
Okay. Within the Air Force, and maybe we're going to back up.
Repeat the question.
Okay. What she asked is, within the Air Force, if I understood the question correctly, within the Air Force, how many positions that we have within security will be indexed to one or more certifications? And I'd say 100% of our centrally managed career field will be indexed to at least SFPC. And that also includes, I think I may have not gone into too much detail with it on my slide, but also we have a few 301s, such as myself, who work with the security career field team. They also will be indexed. But our 086s and our 080s will all at least have the SFPC.
Do you mind if I add something onto that, Steve?
Yes, sir.
The rough numbers right now are about 2,400 employees. The way that we manage our civilian security workforce in the Air Force is a little bit different than Army's. While our provost equivalent function does definitely have a big role in developing standards for that side of the house, still in the end, it all comes together here at AFPC with the group that Steve's a part of, and then that is governed by SAP AA, our senior security official, Ms. Pat Zarakowicz. So even though we're separate, we're not. And that includes the 083s, the 085s, in other words, the police officers, the security guards, the 080s, and the 301s that have 50% or more security duties as collateral, a part of their job.
What are 301s?
Admin. Yeah.
They're general managers, program managers. Yeah.
I think that's a good point, because you can see two different things the Army brings out, that they are decentralized. So for folks who are needing help that have more of a decentralized model to the way you execute, or if you have a more centralized model, that's really one of the reasons why we asked both the Army and the Air Force to grade, because they have two different models. They have two different sets of problems with the boats in the ocean or something like that. I can't remember what that was, but there's two separate sets of problems to the same. Going to the same solutions.
You're in different boats, but in the same ocean.
In different boats in the same ocean.
There you go.
Got it. Any other questions for Air Force or Steve or Dave?
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. These we go into open questions now before we finish up. Any open questions?
I have one open question. About halfway through this process, I've been working with DSS for this is Jody Todd with NGA, since I think February 2012 on this program. About halfway through this, we decided to go to a different concept for HR called career services. Part of the career services is to give, like our pay band 5s, which is GS-15 equivalents, different experiences and different opportunities in different positions. Now, this is the decision of our leadership in career service. We may get like program managers and stuff like that put into security GS-15 positions, or 13, 14 positions. How would we handle something like that when they could be in there for only maybe 2-3 years and then they're out again? I mean, we're starting to look at our GS-15 as managers that can basically fill any position. So we're going to have basically two fields we're going to go through, which is the management field and the subject matter expert field. But that manager may be in charge of a division of personnel security. So how would you work that into the certification issue.
Especially now that we don't have SCPC, that would be an overarching manager, security manager type.
Correct.
It's great. That is a great question. Anybody would like to very guess?
Well, I would tell you what the Air Force would do. We have a similar program as that called our key career positions, and it's much like that, where we through a modified hiring process place individuals into positions where they'll gain enterprise level skills deemed by whatever definition Air Force A1 comes up with, and we index those just like the rest because they're there for a 3-year controlled tour, and they need to get the prerequisite certifications when they get there within 2 years, or they face the same difficulties that a standard employee would.
Jason, Army?
Yeah, I mean, that would essentially be the same with us. I think for us, it's for positions that can rotate, as long as they're there for 2 years. If they're there for 2 years or less, it's not worth their time. And that's part of the challenge that we have with trying to index military. Even if you get to identify who they are, they're just not there long enough to justify saying you'll get that military time. Like these days, for example, they're on a 3-year tour.
So basically, if they're there for 2 years or less, you wouldn't worry about it. But if they're there for more than 2 years, you would index them to get their certification.
Yeah, that's kind of how we see it. At least the ones that you're dividing.
Tom Wise.
Yeah.
I see we're looking at the 080s, the 86s, and 85s for this. Are we looking at any of the 1811s that might do some of the same?
Are anybody looking at 1811s? Your investigators?
Well, Department of the Army, no. Think about like the stage. We have, I believe it, and Nick can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have in the Army the largest brick and mortar law enforcement training in the Department of Defense. Where they are accredited. And so they have a number of certifications and accreditations required specifically related to not touching. Nick, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean that's our role. That's a big split for us. In the Army, you have the security. Yes, we have our 080 security, but I think the Air Force is a little different. Our 083s, 085s, 1811s, 1801s, 1802s, 1805s, 1810s, all that is strictly law enforcement. Will not be touched. Will not come over into this area at all.
And that's the same for Air Force as far as the 083s and 5s. Yeah, if they're doing pure law enforcement, there are no plans to index at this time.
That didn't answer your basic question?
Yeah, answer that basic question.
Are there any other questions for today?
Well, a question over here. This is Terrence Phelps with the Army. People on the line here. Something that just kind of came up as we were talking earlier in the morning, but wondering if there's any anticipation or if there's any kind of way forward out there for how we'd reconcile the requirement that we're asking of commanders to give staff enough time and training requirements to get certified versus the ambition of the staff who are looking at a level higher in their current position. Say someone's in an SFPC position, but there's an opening for a SAT PC or SPY PC, and they're looking to go and get that certification, file the candidate. What do we asking of the command? Training and time for that.
I would say it's no different than allowing them time for promotion, studying for the promotion. Because in order to get the promotion, you have to have the certification.
Or it's not necessarily. So you would have to. Yeah, no. I mean,
Ours is based on mission availability. If you've got time to study, you can study during duty hours, but if the mission always comes first.
You know, one thing that we found helpful is we've begun to socialize this with commanders out in the field, and we've gotten a little better at it over time. One of the first questions out of their mouth after "Who are you?" is how much is this going to cost? And one of the big talking points that we find helps us is other than time of your individual employee studying for the test. The test itself is 2 hours, and then driving there. But you've got the tests that are delivered through a third-party vendor, Pearson Review. They've got, at least from an Army perspective, we've got testing centers within 50 miles, I believe, of every installation across the planet, with the exception of some places in Africa. So the testing itself is free. There's no required training, but if you want to take training, the training is really to get through the test. It's all online and free. And then the test itself is free. So we find that shuts down a lot of concerns right off the top.
Good answer. Actually, very good answer. Does training agnostic help with any of those arguments? Because there is no training required to actually take it.
Well, it partially answers the question, Mike, because that answers their question in terms of what is this going to cost to train. It doesn't cost me anything because you're not forcing me to send me to train. But then the next breath is, well, how are you preparing your workforce? And so what we all need to do from a career management standpoint is lay out what are those training courses, free or otherwise, that folks are going to need to get exposed to in order to get the requisite knowledge, not only pass the exams, but do the job. And I think that comes down to career management.
That's, we have some of that in the book, and it's now, career math, but also.
Which goes to the CDU.
Anything else? I guess I have a question for the crowd. Is now that we have all this information, that you guys have heard and presented, what do you feel that you need to move forward with your agency? Because I think Jason hit it, or maybe it was Jason. Because everybody is at a different stage. Some folks, it kind of looks like pumpkin teeth. You got some folks who are just starting. You got some folks who are a little bit higher. They're kind of gone through. What is there besides what we presented today, and what's on your file share that would actually help you from a community perspective that maybe we can look at help designing, pulling together, etc.
Mike,
Sure.
as a new person into this, any training that you could provide me personally, I would come to. Because, I'm taking over from Jody, and I'm still learning. So anything that you can give me, and you're the subject matter expert, is basically I can use everything, lack of a better term.
Well, I'm not the subject matter expert, but you got at least 3 of them in the HR.
You asked the question. How's that?
Okay, no, but so additional maybe that's what if we could take some of the things that were discussed that weren't explored too much, maybe put them in another venue. I don't say training, but another information type activity. Steve?
I'm just wondering if there's a suggested list of milestones that we should be hitting at certain periods of time.
Good. Suggested list of milestones. Very good. Timelines, milestones. Tim, and the reason I asked this is, and Tim's over there writing, and Dr. Joe's writing too, is we do have some availability of resources to maybe put some of the stuff together. Because as you've seen, there's nothing that really needs to be invented anymore. I mean, there is a process. There is, DOD has issues and processes in there. We just got to pull it in and make it work for us.
Is there any way the Army and Air Force already has their stuff moving forward to take what they have and provide like templates that we can just modify depending on which one we want to use?
And that's my next step.
You're not there yet?
I'm not there yet. I've not reached that milestone.
He's been with us 3 weeks.
30 days?
30 days.
2 weeks?
2
2 weeks, he was on leave for forever.
Hey, Mike.
Yes, sir.
Hey, I thought of one thing that I could use personally as a program manager for Air Force. If you could just have a little tape recorder that's with Joe saying everything's going to be all right, Dave, and send that to me. I can play that like every morning when I come into work. That'd be awesome.
You got it.
So is that your theme song?
He asked for it, he's going to get it. Every morning, somebody from my staff would call us, like, everything's okay.
It's in your WAV file. So
Dave, just go to the Staples building and get the little red button and